So, now that we're winding things down, I wanted to do what I've always promised that I would, or at least said that I wanted to do, and get some of the Patreon exclusive videos out into the general population. It's not like I think they were ever being watched at all over on Patreon. At least I never had a single comment on any of them. But now that I've shut down my Patreon completely, I'm going to just be repurposing them, 10 at a time, into supercuts. I can't guarantee that they're all going to show up here, but I'm going to try, at least for the majority. These are all going to be in their original form as my patrons actually saw them. So let's get started. Why are the religious so bad at proving God? The Christians fail, the Muslims fail, and today a Jew is going to fail. Just call it a feeling. I don't know. I don't think we're going to get to the end of this and be convinced, but hey, I'm willing to be proven wrong, because that would be a novel change of pace. So let's get to it. We don't do a lot of Jewish videos around here, and I don't really know why. I guess I just don't stumble across a lot of them, but if you'd like to change that, then by all means suggest Jewish or Hindu or Buddhist or whatever. I'm not picky. Suggest those videos, and I'd be more than happy to go after them. However, this one just came up in my feed, so here we go, with a Jew, Rabbi Glick, trying to prove that God is real. And I don't think he'll be any more successful than anybody else is, but I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
In the very beginning, there was just Hashem, nothing else.
And how do you know that? Because this is just a common religious claim with no evidence to back it up. In fact, science, based on the majority of current models, doesn't think that there was a beginning. There's always been something here, at least as best as we can articulate and understand. The Big Bang wasn't the beginning of everything. It was just matter and energy changing form. There was a singularity of sorts, since modern physics doesn't even know if a singularity is possible, but there was a thing that gave rise to our particular instantiation of space-time, but that does not mean that was the beginning of everything, like the religious would like us to believe. Science keeps refining its views, and who knows if we'll ever get it all completely right. So we've already got a completely empty, unjustified claim right there, because that's a surprise. Hopefully you've got something else, because otherwise this is all just a complete waste of time.
And nothing else doesn't mean that there was nothing. There wasn't nothing, even, right?
Well, no. There wasn't nothing because nothing simply cannot exist. There was never nothing. The only people who say that there was nothing are the religious, who are just making it all up in their heads. There is no nothing, there has never been nothing, and there will never be nothing, because nothing is just a concept, not a real thing. Granted, he has to say that there wasn't nothing because he needs somewhere to shoehorn in his imaginary friend. So there had to be something, right? Not that he can prove it or anything, and this is supposed to be about proving God exists, although I have a feeling he's not even going to try to do that, because this is the religious, right? He'll just assert it just like all the other religious loons do. So let's just wait and see, because I have a feeling we're right.
And it's not a incorrect double negative. Nothing is a concept. In order to be able to say there is nothing, there has to be a concept of something.
I already said that, didn't I? Nothing is a concept that does not exist in reality. If you have a concept of nothing, it's no longer nothing, it's something. So nothing isn't even possible except for a word and an idea that humans just made up. Every time that we look for nothing, we only find something. And he's halfway through his video. Sorry, it looks like this is going to be on the short side. And he hasn't even remotely tried to prove his God. He hasn't even mentioned his God. The Jews are just as bad at this as everybody else. Big surprise there.
And a concept of the absence of something which is nothing, but the concept of nothing didn't even exist.
No, not at the time, because there was no one there to even conceptualize it. Concepts need brains, and there were no brains in existence. I mean, there's hardly any of them out there right now. Imagine how barren it was at the moment of the Big Bang. So I guess he's stumbled on being kind of right, at least in the sense that there wasn't a concept of nothing, but that's because nothing isn't a real thing. Why do I get the feeling he's going to get to the very end of this and just declare whatever he's talking about, God, and just call it a day? Because that's how these people tend to work, right? It's going to be exceedingly dumb.
There wasn't anything. There was just Hashem. There was no concept. There was no logic. There was no reason. There was no anything. There was just Hashem.
And that's his proof for God. Just saying, God was there. That's what Hashem means. It's just the respectful way for Jews to refer to God. Just stating that God was there is not proof for God. That's absurd, but what should we expect, right? I'm sorry, this was even dumber than I imagined, and that's kind of saying a lot, isn't it? Rabbi Glick is an idiot. Okay, I have got to go look at the comments on this, so hold on for a second. Yep, just about every single comment on this video is an atheist calling this moron out. It's amazing how the religious just twist the idea of God in existence. That's all that's going on, though. It's, here's the stuff that we don't like or don't understand, therefore God. But that doesn't prove that God is real, does it? They're just stapling the word God on the end, or Hashem in this case, and pretending that they've actually proven something. Well, yes, you have. You've proven that you're a moron. If you didn't know that this was a Jewish video, I mean, ignore the stupid hat and the Hebrew, then this could have been a Christian video. It could have been a Muslim video. Hell, it could have been a Hindu video, right? Because they're all saying the exact same thing and pretending that it somehow supports their theology when it just makes these people look like idiots. Maybe this is why we don't do a lot of Jewish videos around here. Maybe most of them, not Rabbi Glick because he's an idiot, but maybe a lot of them actually understand that this stuff makes them look stupid and they think better of it and go, well, we're just not going to post that on YouTube. But I wish the rest of them would get the message and stop embarrassing themselves publicly too, because wouldn't that be nice? The religious are desperate to get to their comforting lies to the point that they just ignore all the uncomfortable truths. Not that they care, because they just want to believe. So, let's do some more of that coming up next. This time, we have a video from someone called Saved Skeptic, and I'm willing to bet he has no clue what a skeptic is. He says there is undeniable evidence for Jesus and the reliability of the Bible, and then he just assumes that the Bible is reliable, no evidence offered, and that proves Jesus is real. I mean, talk about circular, but that's not exactly a surprise, is it? So let's go take a look.
From the wealth of ancient manuscripts to the early dating of documents, some penned within 15 years of Christ's death.
That still doesn't make it necessarily accurate, and as you can see on screen, some of it is just a couple of words. The religious tend to completely oversell this stuff. The earliest copies of anything that we have are incredibly fragmentary. Some of the earliest fragments that we have come from the middle to late 2nd century, specifically called P90 and P104. Even if you were to say that the earliest books were written within 15 years, and those are Pauline works who never even claimed to have seen a physical Jesus, the first actual copies we have of any of it, since most of it's just a couple of words, you really can't say for certain what was in the originals. P90, which was found with a group of other fragments in a garbage dump in Egypt, has small portions of John 18:36 to 19:7. Okay, fine. That tells you nothing about any other parts of John. The same goes for P104, which has Matthew 21:34 through 37 and traces of verses 43 and 45. That tells you absolutely nothing about anything else. It's what you can prove that matters, not what you can assert. And unfortunately for you idiots, you can't prove a damn thing.
And the numerous accounts provided by 9 authors in the New Testament's 27 books.
The Gospels were written anonymously by non-eyewitnesses. We know that because they copied extensively from each other, something that is absolutely not a hallmark of eyewitness testimony. If you saw it for yourself, you don't need to crib off of anyone else. Most of the rest were Pauline or pseudo-Pauline, since we know that more than half of the books typically or traditionally attributed to Paul were not written by Paul. We have no clue who wrote 6 of his 13 books, which makes them pretty unreliable. In fact, there were a couple of books written in Paul's name that weren't even included in the Bible, since even the early church fathers recognized that they were just nonsense. The Epistle of the Laodiceans and 3 Corinthians were entirely rejected for biblical canon. And then Hebrews was written entirely anonymously, and it was only church tradition that said that Paul wrote it, and we know better than that now. So you have 0 actual eyewitness accounts to Jesus in the Bible, and the vast majority of books don't even pretend that they ever saw a real Jesus. So how is this evidence for anything? I'd really like to know.
Along with corroborating archaeological findings that have never contradicted the New Testament's claims.
I'd have to see some more details on that because I don't know what he really means. Maybe we'll get to that in a second. I don't know because I don't watch this stuff up front. But most stuff in the New Testament isn't supported at all. At least not the supernatural stuff, which is really the stuff that needs the support. You have stuff that believers wrote down, but just because they really believed it, that doesn't make it true. You have things that the church has traditionally held to be true, but that doesn't make it true either. It's the truth that matters, and that needs to be independently corroborated, and there isn't any independent corroboration for anything magical in the Bible at all. Now, places? Sure, there was a Jerusalem. So what? There's a New York City, but that doesn't prove that Spider-Man is real. The existence of Jerusalem doesn't make Jesus real. You'd need direct, demonstrable, verifiable evidence for a real, historical, verifiable Jesus, and you don't have any. You just don't. Stop pretending that you do.
Christianity offers substantial evidence to support its claims. Not to mention, the New Testament records the fulfillment of hundreds of prophecies written hundreds of years before.
No, actually you don't. A lot of those supposed prophecies were not actually prophecies at all. The anonymous author of Matthew, in particular, he went through the Jewish scriptures and cherry-picked anything that he thought could turn out to be a prophecy, if you squinted at it just right, and then he just claimed that Jesus fulfilled it. Unfortunately for the religious, scholars have gone through and found out that most of these supposed prophecies were not intended as prophecies at all, and they certainly weren't intended to refer to a real physical Jesus. Add to that the fact that you can't prove that Jesus fulfilled anything because we've got no evidence for Jesus at all. Just because my book says a thing, that doesn't mean anything. Now, I could give lots of examples, but I think he's about to give one, so we'll just go and examine that one. And yes, normally I don't look ahead, but I was kind of looking for a place to stop and respond, and he said something about Daniel, so I just jumped back a little bit, and now we'll handle whatever he's about to say. I don't know the details, but we'll go see. You know, making videos like this is kind of weird. Sue me.
Prophecies that cannot be denied, like the more than 300 prophecies about Jesus himself, including Daniel 9, which predicted the exact day of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem.
See, here's the problem. Problems, really. First off, Daniel 9 says something about after a certain time the Anointed One will be put to death, but it doesn't say Jesus. It doesn't say the Messiah. This is just Christians reading into it, and that's a major problem right there. However, we don't even know if Jesus was real, or when any of this stuff happened, if any of it ever happened at all. So they could have just looked at the Old Testament and said, hey, we can use that, and just invented the crucifixion. Nobody can even agree when the supposed crucifixion took place, so how can it have happened a certain number of weeks or years? Nobody really agrees on that either after this event. This is just a whole lot of reading into stuff that doesn't mean anything. Now, maybe he's going to say some stuff, I don't know, let's see, because what he's done so far is not at all impressive.
Or Isaiah 53, which details the crucifixion and resurrection.
And I guess he didn't. But Isaiah 53 is no more impressive. In fact, it's even less impressive. The author of Isaiah wasn't writing about something that would happen hundreds of years later, and in fact, the verb tenses used specifically say that it was something that was happening at the time that it was being written about. In fact, this falls under the suffering servant passages, which are pretty universally agreed upon to refer not to Jesus, but to Israel itself. It is not predicting a Messiah, it's poetically describing what is happening to the Jewish people. That's why when Christians talk about Isaiah 53, they edit out some pretty big parts of it because those parts can't be made to look like it was talking about Jesus. Verse 10 says that the servant will see offspring and have a long life. So did Jesus have children we don't know about? When the hell did that happen? Yes, some Christians will claim that Christianity itself was his offspring, but the word used for offspring is zera, which literally means seed. That can only be used to refer to biological children. So unless you're going to say Jesus and Mary got it on, as I've referred to in other videos, then you got nothing. So this is just obvious nonsense. We can see in Isaiah 41:8, 43:10, 44:1, 44:21, 45:4, 48:20, 49:3, and 49:7 that the suffering servant is just referring to Israel itself. That's why the religious cherry-pick the passages that they talk about, because taken in context, this whole thing completely falls apart. This is just bullshit. No surprises there.
Jesus' prophecies of the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and his detailed descriptions of the end times which are unfolding before our very eyes.
And Christians have been saying that for 2,000 years. Hasn't happened yet, has it? Because this is all just make-believe. It is people desperately running around with the goalposts trying to get to an emotionally comforting conclusion because they just really want it to be true. But that doesn't make any of it true. It's the truth that matters, and all you have to do is to look at their claims and the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. Not that they care, because this was never about the truth to begin with. This is about comfort, which is why this idiot is only making a video for the already faithful, not for anybody who could poke holes in all of his empty assertions and just laugh about it.
The truth is, the historical authenticity of the New Testament, combined with the accuracy of prophecy, gives us more than enough evidence to conclude that this is a truthful account.
And not really a surprise, but it ends in the middle of a sentence. I mean, how dumb can these people be? Really? I wouldn't say if it was once or twice, but this is pretty consistent. Learn to edit. It's not that hard. This whole thing is just unjustifiable assertion slathered in blind faith sauce. it doesn't make any of it true. And the people that he's making the video for, they don't care at all, right? They are after that dopamine hit in the brain, and they're willing to sacrifice their intellectual integrity to get it. If this was so convincing, why could I poke so many holes in it so easily? Because none of this is actually true. Because the scholarship, free of faith and fifis, shows that it's not true. None of these people care because they're just in it for the faith and the fifis, as they always are. They're just making fools of themselves, and that's really nothing to be proud of. So anyway, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Are you impressed with any of this kind of stuff? Because I never ever am, because I know the actual facts, and the religious, not only are they ignorant, they're proud of it. They don't want to know. They want to be ignorant because ignorance is bliss. They just really want to believe. That's why they look so dumb to the rest of us, because they've kind of earned it. Is there proof for heaven? Absolutely not, although I'd be happy if someone could come up with something, anything better than what we're talking about today. Because this is going to be positively pathetic, but since when has a single religious video ever not been? Never. The answer is never. I just thought you'd want to know. This one comes from a channel called I Am Kevin Eloy. Okay, that's nice, Kevin. Why should I care? But he's trying to prove to us that heaven is real and claims this video is all the proof we need. I bet he's wrong. Want to get in on this action? Throw your bet down in the comments. Not that it'll matter or anything, but maybe you can make a side wager and make a couple of bucks off of it. I don't know. But anyhow, let's just get to it.
How do we know heaven even exists?
Good question. Of course, I don't think you're going to have a good answer, and in fact, I'm going to point out everywhere that you go wrong, because of course he's going to, right? Every apologist does. I don't care what it says in your big book of multiple choice. I don't care what you really wish was true. When atheists ask the religious to demonstrate a proposition, we don't mean what sounds good to you. We mean what you can actually back up in such a way that we can evaluate your claims independently and objectively of your wishes and dreams. You never see them coming through on that, do ya? Of course, we don't really expect them to because they fail all the time. But sure, go ahead, Kevin. Let's see what you got.
Here's a daily devo to help you become a wholehearted follower of Jesus.
That was said really quickly, wasn't it? But here's my response to that. Unless you can prove that Jesus existed, and good luck on that, and that what Jesus said was factually correct, and good luck on that too, then I'm not going to follow your stupid imaginary friend. Because this is where the religious really have problems. They are only emotionally attached to their beliefs, not intellectually convinced as someone like me would have to be to take any of this seriously. I am not looking for your imaginary friend. I want the truth, and if your God and boy wonder can be demonstrated with verifiable evidence to be the truth, then certainly I will accept it as the truth. Otherwise, I won't. The religious have some seriously unrealistic expectations. We don't want to believe. We want to know the truth. We're not in it for fifis and faith. So come up with some that you can demonstrate is actually so. We'll wait. It seems to be all that we do around here after all.
Let me give you 2 reasons why we know that heaven exists.
If neither of those reasons are verifiably evidence-based, then you don't know squat. This is another problem with the religious. They don't know the difference between belief and knowledge. Knowledge requires some verifiable basis in fact. You can't just say, I know, without showing how you know. How did you come to that conclusion rationally? Of course, they never have an answer for that, do they? They just really want it to be true. That's why they're idiots. They don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Although I could probably give you many others.
I bet you can't even give us those too. However, I haven't seen what he's going to say, so I'm not going to be too hard on him just yet, but seriously, learn to walk before you run right off a cliff. How about if you just give us one that stands up to intellectual and evidential scrutiny, because I've got absolutely no reason to think you can even do that.
First, I am convinced that heaven exists because the Bible says that God has set eternity in man's heart.
My book says a thing. So this is not proof. You being convinced for wholly emotional reasons doesn't make it actually so. You're just failing already. Not that we should really be surprised. Because this is not what it takes to prove something is a fact. I don't give a shit about your Bible because your Bible has not been verified to be factually correct. And it's the factual correctness that matters, not I like it. You might want to get on that. Of course, he's not talking to us. He's talking to people who already believe this shit and don't actually care about the truth. They've already got blind faith. This is why we don't take these lunatics seriously, because this is really all they can do. They pander to the faithful who already believe because it makes them feel good. So you've already failed. You've got jack shit. Just pack it in right now. However, let's see where else this goes, because, hey, I need a good laugh.
And if you think about it, that hope is almost universal.
No, it's actually not. Now, hope means nothing. Hoping that you've got $1 billion in your bank account, that doesn't mean that you do. This is all the religious can really rely on because they don't have any demonstrable facts. They just really want to believe, and that's stupid. Living your life relying on wishes and dreams, that just makes you look like an immature idiot, which of course that's exactly what they are. They don't have to keep proving it because it's already an established fact. Can you try for some credibility sometime? Because that would sure be a nice change of pace.
It's like a part of every religion. And the reality is that the Bible says this hope comes from God. He wants us to know that death is not the end and that we will live with him one day forever.
You are a complete idiot. They're so busy theologically masturbating that they can't see what complete imbeciles they actually are. This is not proof for anything except your own stupidity. You really need to learn what words mean, because this is not what that word means. Knock it the fuck off.
However, the main reason why I know that heaven exists is because of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ.
That thing you can't prove ever happened. I figure this is what he'd say, and sadly, I was right. I usually am, just out of experience. I would really love to be wrong once in a while, but after watching these wingnuts for a long time, it's hard not to be right about their stupidity. I just like it. So what? But I like it. This is not how you get to actual reality. You can't show that Jesus ever existed at all, much less rose from the dead. Of course, since his first proof was just a bald-faced assertion about a book of mythology, I guess we shouldn't really be surprised, should we? I don't even know what to say to these people anymore because they are so consistently stupid. Okay. Go ahead, just get it off your chest, because nobody with a brain is going to be paying attention. This isn't proof of anything but your own stupidity, and that's not exactly a surprise.
You see, when he died on that cross, he erased the one thing that could keep us from heaven forever.
Bet he didn't. I mean, beyond the fact that you can't prove any of this stuff ever happened at all, I'm figuring he's going to say Jesus erased sin, which is demonstrably untrue if we still sin. It's like Christians are so stupid they can't figure this shit out. But I have no idea if that's what he was really going for, so let's get back and see. There is one other possibility that I can think of, and it doesn't do him any good either. So let's get back to Kevin, already in progress.
Sin.
And sadly, I was right. Of course, the other possibility was something like not knowing Jesus, since the Bible says the only way to go to heaven is to believe in Jesus, but it's not like the religious know their own fucking mythology, so what the hell difference does that make? Jesus didn't take away anyone's sins, or we wouldn't sin anymore. Sin wouldn't even be a thing. Everyone would just automatically go to heaven if any of that was actually true. Of course, Christianity wouldn't have any power or money or social influence if that's what they preached, so they don't preach that, do they? Why do I know more about this than they do? I'd really like to know.
When he rose from the dead, he guaranteed once for all that there is life after death and that heaven is real. And the Bible says that he goes to prepare a place for me and you.
So, I'm going to heaven even though I think all of this is just a load of shit. Okay, if you say so. I don't think you'll find a lot of Christians who would agree, but hey, if that's your position, fine, whatever. This is the problem with preaching hippy-dippy nonsense based on fifis and blind faith. It's absolutely not supportable biblically. Not that it matters since the Bible is just a book of mythology, but this is why there's more than 45,000 distinct sects of Christianity, right? Anybody can just make up their own version, and in fact, most of them do. This is why it's really simple to play them off against each other, because nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. Because none of them actually believe the same thing. It's all just shit that they're making up in their heads, and none of it is defensible.
If you know that heaven is real, type amen in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more.
Fuck you. Again, that is not how knowledge works. Not that he cares one bit. He just really likes the idea, proving conclusively what a complete imbecile he is. I'm after demonstrable fact, and looking to these mental midgets to provide it is an eternally losing proposition. They don't know, and they don't care. They think they know, they're just wrong. The only thing we do know is they don't give a shit, which is why they need to spend so much time embarrassing themselves in public and why we spend so much time laughing at them. This is not a good look, Kevin, but you're not making this video for me, are you? You're making it for the mindless minions in the pews who really want it all to be true too. But that doesn't make it true. That's why these people are only worth laughing at. They have no intellectual credibility whatsoever, not like they care. Why can't we find a single theist with a brain out there who knows how to use it? Let me know down in the comments because I'm really tired of this being the best that the religious can offer. Somebody find me someone with a clue, because that would sure be nice, wouldn't it? So, did the Hindus predict the modern world? Yeah, that didn't happen, did it? But there are crazy people out there who think that it did, and those people have clearly done absolutely no research of any kind whatsoever to back it up. Because the actual facts prove just how wrong they are. Not that they care. And that's pathetic. Let's go off on a tangent. I do a ton of Christian videos, a fair number of Muslim videos, but I really don't do a lot on other religions. It's understandable because there are a massive number of Christian and Muslim videos available to do, but not so much on other religions. So we're going to do something from Curious Plus called Proof that Hinduism is the most accurate religion. Is it? Is it really? I care only if it's actually true, and demonstrably so. So let's check this out and see if it stands up to any kind of critical scrutiny. Because I'm willing to bet that it doesn't, but hey, let's see.
This man had proved that the ancient Hindu texts are absolutely true.
And it looks like we're starting in the middle of another video, because that never happens, right? Who is this man, and how the heck did he do that? Because again, I'm willing to bet that that isn't actually the case. Maybe we'll get some answers coming up, I don't know, but like the Bible, I don't see how anyone can show that a lot of things in the Vedas are actually true, because there is no evidence to back any of it up. My book says a thing is never going to be convincing. Or maybe he's talking about very normal, natural claims and just assuming that that makes everything else that isn't normal or natural true. I mean, Christians pull that shit all the time. So, who is this guy, and what did he prove true, and what evidence did he use to do so? Not claims, not faith, not wishful thinking, not, it seems to me. Truth requires independent corroboration that anyone can examine without having to believe anything about it first. So why do I think he's not going to have any of that? I don't know. Let's go see.
Charles Hutchins Hapgood was an American professor and researcher whose work on the Earth's pole shift theory reveals the true history of our planet.
Okay, and that has what to do with Hinduism? Now, I can already see where this is going, because this is very, very common. If you can pick something out of the text that sort of resembles something that might be true in reality, at least if you squint really, really hard, that must make everything in the book true, right? The Muslims have been floating that turd forever. However, that is not how this works. You actually need demonstrable evidence for each and every claim that you want to validate in the book, and we all know that will not be forthcoming. Now, before we get too far, it is true that Charles Hapgood did work on polar shift research, but he was also kind of a kook. He spent 10 years working with a medium trying to contact notable figures from history. This medium, Elwood Babbitt, was a student of Edgar Cayce, and let's be honest, he was nuts. By the end of Hapgood's life, he was solely publishing books on woo, and nobody really takes anything in that era of his life seriously. So this isn't the slam dunk that I figure this guy wants to think, but let's get back to the video and see.
While he was investigating about the continent of Mu, which was first mentioned in an ancient Hindu text.
Yeah, but Mu isn't real. Never has been. It's pure pseudoscience that nobody with a brain takes seriously, and it has been completely debunked by the scientific community. Besides, the idea didn't even come from Hinduism. It came from Augustus Laplangian, and I know I probably said that wrong, but who cares? But he was a late 19th century photographer who believed that the ancient Mayans were somehow connected to an even more ancient Egyptian culture via a lost continent named Mu, which he named after the Mayan queen Mu. James Churchward picked up the torch and wrote books on the idea in the early 20th century, where he started to make claims about various ancient civilizations that all must have come from Mu because, reasons. There's no evidence for any of this. It's just dumb people being dumb, and none of it came from Hinduism whatsoever. In fact, the only conceivable link of sorts, again, if you squint at it just right, is a supposed lost continent called Lemuria, which comes from ancient Tamil and Sanskrit literature. So this guy is just conflating the two because he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. And that's really not much of a surprise, is it?
He wrote a book called The Earth's Shifting Crust, You will be surprised to know that it was forwarded by Albert Einstein, and he supported Hapgood's research.
Yep, but that doesn't make it true. This is just fallaciously appealing to authority, which doesn't mean anything at all. Einstein thought the idea was interesting, but he didn't support it entirely, and if you read the foreword in the book, it only says that the idea has potential, despite the lack of mainstream scientific acceptance and the significant geological debate over the subject. As time went on, Einstein started to doubt the idea, and in still existing correspondence, Einstein pointed out ideas in Hapgood's book that were simply false. Hapgood, to his credit, did revise his work in a later edition that he called The Path of the Pole. But it's still wrong, though.
This book suggests that a catastrophic pole shift happened about 12,000 years ago, which had a terrible effect on all life forms on Earth. The ancient Hindu texts talk of various yugas and pralayas, or catastrophes, which happen periodically.
Yep, just like the Bible talks about a worldwide flood. That doesn't mean it happened, though, does it? Because Hapgood has never been taken seriously by the scientific mainstream. He's just another kook that made a bunch of claims and got laughed at by everyone with a clue. Even Einstein eventually distanced himself from the idea when it became obvious just how ludicrous the whole thing was. This is really going where I figured that it would. Pick something out of the Hindu texts, find something that sounds vaguely similar elsewhere, and claim that proves that the texts were true. Except it doesn't. So this whole thing is completely meaningless.
Now, Hapgood's research suggests that the last magnetic pole shift could have significantly reduced the sizes and lifespans of creatures inhabiting this planet, including humans.
Well, we know that pole shifts happen. That's been demonstrated objectively. On average, every 200,000 to 300,000 years, the magnetic poles shift, and we are very much overdue for one, the last one occurring about 780,000 years ago. Of course, this isn't a sudden event. The fields weaken and then flip, and it causes virtually no harm to anything living on the planet. At worst, we might see some temporary disruptions to navigation and technology, but that's not going to last for long. It's not even going to affect anyone's lifespan. This whole thing is really kind of silly.
Shockingly, the ancient Hindu texts have been saying the same things for over thousands of years.
Not really. At best, Vedic and Puranic texts talk about cosmic cycles, and yes, they do mention magnetism, although not in direct relation, and this is just something that true believers yank out of their collective asses because none of this is clearly spelled out. Like with the Bible, you get people making wild-eyed interpretations when there is no evidence to back any of it up. Some people say that the Rig Veda describes the Earth as having two poles, but it doesn't say that clearly. Some claim that there's one verse that claims that the North Pole gives out energy and the South Pole absorbs it, describing a magnetic cycle, and that's also not demonstrably true. This is all interpretation after the fact. Hey, that sounds like something I read about in a book once, but that doesn't mean anything. This is just squinting with an overactive imagination. The ancient Hindus had no clue about modern science. You people need to yank your heads out of your asses because you're just making fools of yourselves. This is why these videos don't get you anywhere. It's all just wishful thinking with no evidence whatsoever in support. Yet the religious don't care about that, do they? This just shows how gullible people are, and sadly, there's a whole lot of really gullible people out there, right? That really needs to change. And if you go and look at the comments on this video, it is filled with gullible idiots who just really like the idea and are spinning even more empty tales because they all wish it was true. But that doesn't make it true. The more that we look at ancient religious texts, the easier it is to tell that they were wrong. They were primitives who invented things to explain how the world around them worked when they didn't understand how the world around them worked. they didn't actually understand much of anything. Now, they weren't stupid. That's something else that we need to disabuse ourselves of. But they lacked the same kind of critical thinking skills and scientific knowledge that we ought to have today. Too bad so many people are still so stupid, though, right? And that really has to change, and the sooner the better, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. Can you prove God through science? Well, of course not, don't be silly, but the religious love to pretend that you can, even though they don't even address science at all. They just make stuff up and claim their interpretations are accurate science, but they're just wrong. So let's go look at another example. We come to another TikTok channel called The W Feed, and I have no idea what that is. I mean, the woo-woo feed? Probably something like that, but he's claiming that this is how to prove the existence of God through science. And then he goes on to show that he has no clue what science is, or at least his representative in the video does so, and that's hardly a surprise, isn't it? So let's get to the fail, and this is a massive fail. Not that the religious really give a damn. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
Your eyeball's amazing. You know, at the back of your eye, there are 137 million light-sensitive cells in 1 square inch, called your retina.
Oh, good, Kent Hovind. It's hard to come up with a bigger con man than Kent Hovind. Granted, there are a lot of apologists who would hear that and say, hold my holy water, because out-scamming the scam artists is kind of a challenge for the religiously unscrupulous, right? But sure, let's play along for shits and giggles. Yes, it is relatively true what he said. So what? Oh, I know where he's going, but I can't understand how that could happen without my imaginary friend, therefore God. But that's stupid. This is really where they go wrong, so let's explain that before we get back to Kent. Even if you can't understand it, even if you don't like the sound of it, even if it turned out that there was no way it could have happened, and keep in mind that's absolutely not true, that still doesn't get you to your imaginary friend. The religious are just using "it sounds good to me" as a way to get around their own ignorance. And like I said, this is how they make a buck off the backs of the religiously gullible and ignorant. You have to prove that your God is real first. And they're not even trying to do that, if you notice. So let's get back and watch Kent make a complete fool of himself, because I think in his entire history, that's about all he's ever done.
All of them wired straight to the brain. How would you like to hook up 137 million electrical connections in 1 square inch?
I wouldn't, but then again, I'm not the one claiming that someone did. That's you. Of course, he isn't really concerned with the logistics. He just thinks magic done it, but that's because Kent is a moron. He's just running on pure fifis and faith and assuming that God can do anything because that's the story he's made up in his head. Oh, it's too hard for nature to do it over millions of years of evolution, therefore his magical father figure in the sky did it, because he said so. Sure, why not? Yet he'll never acknowledge the basic failure of his proposition, that he hasn't proven that his God is actually real or could or did actually do the things that he's just yanking out of his puckered asshole. This is why he's such a ridiculous fool. Because Kent is a complete moron. Big surprise there.
You know, your eyeball's amazing. It would take a minimum of 100 years of Cray computer time to simulate what takes place in your eye many times every second.
Remember when Cray computers were impressive? Today, that's nothing. You can probably simulate it on your phone. That's not exactly fair to Kent, though, since this video comes early to mid-90s, maybe. And, of course, he can't know what the future will bring. It's like comparing all of the technological computing power of the Apollo spacecraft to the modern day and realizing that everything that they had to have, all those tons of computers to do, you could do today with a cheap $5 pocket calculator. So I'm not going to get down on him for that, since no one could accurately see the future of technology, but you notice that the apologists expect modern atheists to be able to do that, right? How many of them have you ever heard say, science will never be able to answer that question? You know, if you don't know that right now, then the only answer has to be God. Yeah, these people are real idiots, and one of the chief idiots is right there on screen. But sure, Kent, keep on going. You're just making yourself look like an idiot, although granted, some of that is only in retrospect. I will always endeavor to be fair, unlike the religious con men.
Eyeballs are amazing. But this textbook says the complex structure of the human eye may be the product of millions of years of evolution.
Yep, because it is. And in fact, it wasn't just one eye that evolved, it's many. Some say up to 40 different times, although it's also possible that the basic structure evolved early in the history of multicellular life, and all the other differences came about later. I honestly don't know. I'm not a biologist, but there are a lot of different types of eyes, each working well within its particular ecological niche. In fact, a lot of them are far superior to our own eyes. The eyes of a squid and octopi lack the blind spot that we have because their optic nerve doesn't run through the middle of their photoreceptors. That would be a really idiotic design choice if some magical man in the sky did it, but it works well enough for us, and evolution has no end goal in mind. So, Kent, again, is an idiot. What else is new?
Why doesn't God get the glory for what he did?
Because there's no reason to think that there are any gods around or were responsible for anything. Is this a serious question? No, of course it's not, and Kent is clearly standing up on stage in front of a bunch of clueless Christians who really wish it was true. If you want God to get the glory, so to speak, then you have to prove God is real in the first place and demonstrably did what you really want to think that he did. Get on that, won't ya? Because faith doesn't mean anything. Kent wants to prove God through science, but Kent has no clue how science works, and the next 30 years of his pathetic career have proven exactly that. He's a clueless moron and a scam artist. That's why virtually nobody on the planet takes him seriously. Big surprise there.
If painting is proof there was a painter, even if you never see the guy.
It's not. If you spill a can of paint on the ground, someone can claim it was painted, but it was in fact spilled. There are elephants that can paint. There are apes that can paint. I've seen people let their cats walk through paint and then walk across a canvas and claim that was painted. That doesn't mean that there was a painter except in the colloquial sense. Computers can produce art as well. Are those now painters? Not in the sense that Kent is implying. So this is all just nonsense, as if that's any surprise. It is asserting something that cannot be demonstrated in factual reality, but Kent doesn't care about reality at all, does he?
A building is proof there was a builder.
Still no. Granted, he'll only be referring to things that he can prove were built by a builder, but people have lived in caves forever, haven't they? That is a building of sorts, no builder required. In a second, he's going to claim that a creation proves there was a creator, but he hasn't shown that there was a creation at all. He just asserts it because it fits in with his money-making narrative, because Kent is dumb and dishonest. It's really not that hard.
And a watch is proof there was a watchmaker. And design, the creation, is proof there was a creator.
Well, I guess I missed one there, but he still got there in the end. There is no demonstrable creation, Kent. You claiming that there was one doesn't mean that there was one. This is where he and really pretty much all apologists go wrong. They can't tell the difference between a fact and an assertion, but that's why they're only talking to people who are just as dumb as they are. But it sounds good to me doesn't mean anything. It means that you're an imbecile. You can't just assume things. You can't just assert things. You can't just insist that things just have to be true because you really want them to be true. You have to have evidence to back any of it up, and Kent seems to be lacking any objectively demonstrable evidence at all, right? Because Kent's a liar. Knock it off.
See, design simply demands a designer, period. Invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. They are without excuse, the Bible says. There's no excuse.
My book says a thing. So what? Nobody cares what your stupid book of mythology says until you can prove with evidence that it's actually true. Of course, he's not talking to rational people, only the religious wingnuts in the audience who fork over their cash to hear him blather on and on and on incoherently. This is really dumb, but look at who we're talking about, right? He's just saying the things that the suckers in the audience are already primed to believe for emotional reasons, and none of them, not Kent or his marks in the pews, give a damn if any of it is true. But it makes me feel good. That is not a coherent, rational reason to believe any of it. But since when have the religious ever been coherent or rational? Never. Just never.
The psalmist said, "When I consider the heavens," God knows that the study of science will draw us to him.
And now he's just pretending to understand the mind of God. Ego much, Kent? But that's all he's there for, right? To tell a comforting story to people not bright enough to deal with objective reality on their own. Nobody cares what your silly book says. We care what the evidence says. And you're not very good on that front, are you, Kent? In fact, you're positively crap. This is why he doesn't even try to talk to anyone with a brain, because we'd just be laughing at him, just like we are now. So go ahead, laugh, get it all out. It's all this shyster asshole deserves.
Satan knows that too. So Satan has worked really hard in the field of science to make sure it pushes kids away from God.
And that's just a claim too. That's all he has. It's all any of them have. That's just the reality that we have to deal with. It's wishes and dreams and childish imaginations because these people just can't handle the real world. It's the real world that matters, and nope, none of them can deal with it because reality is just too scary for them to face. That's probably the most pathetic thing I've heard in a long time, but it applies to a lot of people, and sadly, they have no interest in adjusting their views. Sorry, but the real world doesn't go away when you close your eyes and pray to your imaginary friends. It's still there, and you still have to deal with it, whether you like it or not. That people flood into the churches every Sunday, although a lot less of them are doing it all the time because church attendance is collapsing and is currently at an all-time low, or believe the comforting lies told by charlatans like Kent, that only proves just how bad off humanity actually is. We have a lot of work still to do. So let's not back down now. Call these idiots out on their stupidity. It's not going to help necessarily, but at least we've tried, and as more and more fall away from the faith, we'll be bettering the future of humanity moving forward. And that, I think, is a very good thing. I like doing morality videos because the religious are so completely clueless on the subject. They just have empty beliefs and wishes and dreams and absolutely no clue what's actually going on. Because they don't want one, do they? So here comes another example. Let's take a look at a video by Molly Ann Luna, who seems to think that you can't have right and wrong without God. There's a lot of problems with that proposition that she will entirely fail to address, because obviously she's just got to be right? Except that's not how any of this stuff works. So let's dive into this and see if she has anything intelligent to say, but I think we all know the answer is no.
Ever notice how we all believe in right and wrong?
Nope, because we don't. There are plenty of people who reject the concept entirely, and even where we do, pretty much everyone accepts their own variations on the theme. There isn't a single standard of right and wrong true throughout space and time. It just doesn't exist. Yet the religious pull this kind of shit all the time, don't they? They'll talk about morality in very vague terms, because if they actually went out and got into the weeds, they'd look like complete idiots. Which of course they are. So no, not everyone accepts right and wrong, and not everyone accepts the same versions of right and wrong that you do. That is laughably absurd, but what can we expect? Anyhow, I figure she has to be going somewhere, so let's get back to it and see.
That's actually proof of God.
No, it's actually not. It's actually proof that you're just a moron. Even ignoring the fact that she's completely wrong in her assertion, which God do you mean and why? Does it mean that Allah exists, or Odin, or Inyan, the creator god of the Lakota people? I mean, which God do you actually mean here? Of course, we know exactly what she means, but why? Where is your evidence that gets you to that conclusion? Well, she doesn't have any, does she? She just really likes the idea. This is why all of these religious arguments fall apart, because it's all just preaching to the choir. My God done it. That doesn't mean that your God done it. That doesn't mean that any God done it. It just means that you're an imbecile who really wishes it was true, and that is not impressive. In fact, it makes you look kind of dumb. Because you are.
Did you know that? If there's no God, then morality is just a personal preference.
And it is. So what? Because one of the things that you'll notice that's baked into all of these insane claims is the idea that their views are automatically correct, no evidence provided. Yes, morality is entirely subjective. Always has been, always will be, and it's very easy to prove. You don't have to like it, it just happens to be true. Yet they don't really want to think about it rationally, do they? Because that might make them sad, and they sure don't want that. That's why it's so important to ask them how they know the things that they claim to know. Not believe, not have faith. How do they know, and upon what evidence have they concluded that their beliefs are actually true? And all you'll get is crickets, because they have nothing. They just really want to believe.
Right? But we know things like murder and injustice are objectively wrong.
No, you don't. You just really wish that they were. They're not, but you wish that they were. Human societies pass laws and hold standards that say that they are, subjectively, but that doesn't mean anything at all. If you have a discussion with the religious, and I do it all the time, you will see them fall apart the second that you start to ask these questions. They insist that their beliefs are true because they really want them to be true. You disagree and you ask for evidence. They will backpedal to something like, I have faith. And then you say you don't care about their faith. And they will make excuses and then run for the hills because that's all they've got. They have nothing else at all. They are counting on you to believe them without question, and the second that you don't, they've suddenly got an appointment somewhere else that they have to get to. None of this is at all remotely defensible. They just really wish it was true. But that doesn't mean anything, does it? Your wishes and your dreams don't impact objective reality one bit. Not that they care.
So where does that standard come from?
It's not a standard. You are starting with entirely false preconceptions. The whole idea is just stupid and easy to dismantle, not that they'll ever admit it. All you have to do is be familiar with different cultures around the world. The second that you can point to the massive inconsistencies, their claims will fall apart. Not that they will ever admit it, because this isn't about reality. It's about an emotionally comforting fantasy. They just really wish it was true. They've been brainwashed into believing it's true. But that doesn't make it true. The second that you make it clear that you don't buy their bullshit, they will suddenly refuse to talk to you. That's not a rational way to evaluate the world. That's pure delusion. And I trust that no one is at all surprised.
Well, the answer is God.
No, the answer is that your preconceptions are nonsense. This is pretty much how most religious discussions go, though, right? They will make bald assertions backed up by nothing but fifis and faith. You tell them that they're wrong, often with evidence and reasoning. They refuse to listen because they're incapable of thinking about it rationally. You keep producing evidence that proves that they are wrong. They run away, screaming at you because you hurt their precious little fifis. This is what religion does to you. It's absolutely pathetic. I don't think we can be that surprised, though, because it's not just the religious that do it. Lots of people do. They have an emotional attachment to the things that they believe for no good reason, and that attachment is far more important to them than the truth is. Whereas I only care about the truth. The truth is all that matters. These people are idiots, which is not remotely a surprise.
Can morality exist without God?
Easily, and it does. You just don't understand morality. You've got something seriously wrong with you upstairs. These are people who have no grasp whatsoever on the real world. They just wish that their emotionally comforting nonsense was true, which it demonstrably isn't, and they couldn't care less about anything else. The world isn't what they really wish it could be. It is what it is, and a rational adult learns to deal with it as it is, without caring about their wishes and their dreams. But then again, these aren't rational adults, are they? These are immature children living in adult bodies without the capacity or interest in just growing the hell up. And that's pathetic, isn't it?
I don't think so, but I'm open to hearing your point of view.
No, you're not. Because I just looked at the comments on this short, and you are just asserting that you're right to everyone who's telling you that you're wrong. Over and over and over and over again. Because this is what the religious do. They make unsupported assertions, and when challenged on those unsupported assertions, they simply restate them as if that makes them more true. How often have you talked to a theist and disagreed with their claims, only to have them insist that you don't really believe that? No, you really agree with me. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Because they can't even imagine that everyone isn't just like they are all the time. They certainly can't imagine that they're wrong or could even possibly be wrong. They're right because they really want to be right, and anyone who disagrees is wrong because they're right. So there. Yeah, that is every bit as childish as it sounds. So what do you think of any of this? I think morality is one of the most obvious places that the religious go wrong, and certainly they are not alone. Lots of people have this problem where they just insist that their own personal views, they have to be true, even though just looking at reality proves that they're anything but. But they don't care, do they? They've got tons of excuses for why they're perfect and nobody else is. Because these people are just idiots. The one thing that they never have is evidence. Because they just don't care. And that's really sad. The religious desperately want people to agree on their magical claims, but they can never offer any evidential reason why we should. Your words don't mean anything. Your emotional appeals are completely worthless. You have to have something of substance to present, and they never ever do. So let's go watch them fail again, okay? Won't that be fun? Here comes a channel called God's Motivation Hub. And the only thing that's motivating me to do here is just roll my eyes. Of course, we haven't even looked at the video yet, but my amazing predictive power suggests that this is not going to be impressive, because it never is. The religious just really want to believe, but wanting doesn't mean anything. It just makes them look like idiots, and we'll have to see if that holds true today. So let's get into it, shall we? Prove to us that God is real. I dare ya.
I want to know why I should believe it's more probable that there is a God than there is.
Okay, up front, these people aren't taking a breath, so it's going to be hard to break in. I'm just warning you now, but I'll try. And I too would like to know that, but so far, I am not seeing any rational reason to think that any gods actually exist. I don't think I'm going to be convinced of that, but I'm certainly willing to be proven wrong. Because in order to convince me, you're going to have actual, demonstrable, verifiable evidence, not just comforting words, and that seems to be all that the religious can manage. You're going to have to go step by step and show me that you have any clue what the hell you're talking about. So let's just keep going and see if we're going to get that, because I wouldn't be holding my breath.
I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic.
Then you don't know what those words mean. Granted, I'm not telling people that they can't use words however they want, because, language is descriptive, not prescriptive. You can do whatever the hell you want to do, but if nobody understands your normative usage of language, then no coherent conversation is ever going to take place. So, for the sake of argument, I'm going to define some terms. Not that it really matters, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Atheism is not believing in any gods. It is not necessarily the belief that there are no gods. If you do not have any active beliefs, and they do need to be active beliefs that some god or gods exist, then you are an atheist, full stop. Agnosticism is not having knowledge of any gods. Not belief, knowledge. These are two entirely different questions. I would argue that everybody is an agnostic on this question because knowledge requires some demonstrable basis in fact, and absolutely no one has that when it comes to gods. They just really want to believe, but that doesn't make their beliefs true. So anyhow, with that out of the way, back to this guy.
And I envy your faith. I just want to know that it's more probable that there is than that there isn't.
And how do you suppose that... Oh shit, Cliff Connectal. I had absolutely no idea, but, I guess whatever. I think we know we're going to get a nonsensical answer now, as if that's any surprise, but yeah, whatever, let's continue. Anyway, back to what I was saying. How do you think you're going to find it more probable that there is a God if you have no evidence whatsoever that any gods exist? You have no reason to think that any gods are even possible, much less real. It all comes down to fifis and confirmation bias, and those things are not rational. If you are not concerned with the reality outside of your own head, then you've got something seriously wrong with you. And speaking of things being seriously wrong, here comes Cliff. So let's go see what he has to say.
The reason that I believe that God exists is because of certain evidence.
Which you don't have any to present on betting. Granted, that's based on a very long history with Cliff Connectal's stupidity, but we'll evaluate whatever he comes up with anyhow, just to point out how terrible it is. Because in reality, the reason he believes it has absolutely nothing to do with evidence. That's just excuses that he's backfilled in after he already believed. The reason he believes is because it fills an emotional void caused by childhood indoctrination and cultural expectations, not facts. It's the facts that matter, though, not the crazy ideas in Cliff's head. But, of course, Cliff can't separate his own internal fantasy from demonstrable reality, which is why he can only speak of belief, not fact. He doesn't care what's actually going on, only what he can rationalize away because he really wishes it was true. But that doesn't matter. But then again, Cliff isn't that bright, is he? He's just a scam artist.
First piece of evidence. Life always comes from life.
So, is God alive? I mean, in the sense that we are alive. Is God a biological entity? If not, this is completely pointless. Granted, Cliff would never acknowledge this because, again, he's not talking about facts, only his own ridiculous religious fantasies. Life, so far as we know, is always biological. We have never seen a single example of anything else going on. Therefore, if life has to come from life, then the first life had to be biological, and in Cliff's fantasy case, it isn't. I'm sure we'll get back to this coming up, but this is just Cliff running roughshod over definitions because he doesn't care about anything remotely resembling actual truth. He's just looking for a shortcut to, God damn it. And I'm sorry, but that's just not going to work.
I don't care if it's plant life, animal life, human life.
Then which of those is God? Because when it comes to his imaginary friend, Cliff only cares about special pleading. None of this applies to his magical friend in the sky because he doesn't want it to. But what Cliff wants is irrelevant. He should only care what's actually going on, and for the religious, that's never a remote concern, is it? Because, they're stupid and dishonest, but what else is new?
In other words, you never get the animate from the inanimate. Is it more reasonable for me to believe in the beginning God, or is it more reasonable for me to believe in the beginning matter and energy?
Then which of those is God? Because when it comes to his imaginary friend, Cliff only cares about special pleading. None of this applies to his imaginary friend in the sky because he doesn't want it to. But what Cliff wants is irrelevant. We should only care what's actually going on, and for the religious, that is never a remote concern, is it? Because, they're stupid and dishonest, but what else is new?
Because I only see life come from life, never life come from non-life, it's far more plausible for me to believe in the beginning God.
But we see no gods. This is just Cliff making up an emotionally comforting conclusion because the idea happens to appeal to him. This is not rational, this is just idiotic. Yet that's really all we see Cliff doing, right? He just really likes the idea. So, hey, it's got to be true, right? If he was serious that life only comes from life, then his conception of God would be absolutely indefensible. God would have to be a biological life form, and he can't have that because this isn't about logic, it's about blind faith. He's got to figure out a way to get back to his comforting beliefs that make absolutely no sense the second you look at them critically, which is why he doesn't want to do that. It's true because I want it to be true. No, Cliff, you're just an idiot. Knock it off.
Second piece of evidence, love. Love is crucial to my marriage, my family, my friendships.
And since love is just a biological reaction in the brain, where are you getting this God thing of yours? Oh, right, more indefensible claims that you just really like the sound of because fifis. Yeah, fuck off, Cliff. Just fuck off. This is just wild-ass assertion theater, nothing more. But that's pretty much all Cliff can do, right? It's pretty much all any apologist out there can do. Pander to the people who really want this stuff to be true and don't worry for a second if it is or not. Because he doesn't care and neither do they. This is a con, trying to get people to give him money and influence by spouting things that he can't prove are actually true. What a complete asshole.
Love is a crucial motive in my life. If it's lacking, life turns very sterile, very empty.
And where is your evidence that it has anything at all to do with any God? Any God, not just his. Granted, he's only concerned with his own God because he's not at all interested in factual reality at all. Faith doesn't get you to truth, and he's not remotely concerned with truth regardless. Here's some stuff that sounds good to me, so it's just gotta be true. No, you're just an idiot, Cliff. You would have to have evidence to support any of this, and we know you have nothing. That's why he's sitting in a park or a college campus just spewing nonsense. He's trying to get them to hand over their money. That's what this is all about.
The only way love can be real is if there is more to reality than matter and energy.
And how exactly do you back that up evidentially? Yeah, we know he won't because he can't, because he's just a scam artist and a professional moron. Here's what I really want to be true. So what? Now, the fact that he isn't getting called out on this proves, I think, that the guy who asked the question was a plant. The religious pull that one all the time, too. It's just a way to get the scripted talking points out there so he can do his thing. Even if that's not the case here, and we really don't know, let's be honest about that, so I'll just give him the benefit of the doubt, even though the religious have been caught at it time and time again, but regardless, that still doesn't mean that anything Cliff is spouting is true. Certainly he has no support for any of it, and it's the support that matters, not his smug bullshit.
There's got to be some type of God who creates us with this innate ability to genuinely love.
Says who? This is just more, it seems to me bullshit. You want it to be true, so it is, because, you can't be wrong. Just ask him and he'll tell you. But my question to you is, says who? That's where the religious always go sideways. It's all assertions, no facts. Nowhere is anything that Cliff said evidentially supported. It's just what he wishes was true, and that makes him a moron, along with anyone in the audience who buys into this crap uncritically. Now, if experience is any guide, most of the people behind him are just there to laugh at him, but I guess there could be some true believers in there too, and those people have serious mental problems, just like Cliff does. Nobody should be this dumb, especially not if you're in college, as I suspect these people are. Granted, given the quality of education at most universities today, that's probably not the case, but they should be taught how to think critically and rationally, and if that were the case, Cliff would be run off any campus that he ever stepped foot on. And wouldn't that be nice? I mean, I certainly think that it would. How about you? Let me know down in the comments. Religious testimony means absolutely nothing because it's rationally indefensible. But the religious really like the idea, so you get a video like we have today. This is absolutely embarrassing for the theists involved and for anybody playing along, just because this is so idiotic end to end. Anyone who takes any of this seriously has a lot of problems. So here we go. Here comes a video from Toby Anointing called Testimonies Prove God is Real. And then, well, you'll just have to see for yourself because, holy crap, this is ridiculous. Yet, it's no worse than most testimonies that you hear from the religiously deluded. They don't care if any of it is true. They don't even care if it sounds made up, which a lot of it really does. They just really want to believe. Because they're idiots. So let's get to it.
Watch this testimony that Jesus is real.
That means nothing because it's all going to be unjustified, unsupportable claims with no evidence attached. This is especially true for claims about Jesus or God or whatever, because you can't even prove these things are real. This is why testimonies are completely meaningless. There is no way for anyone else to verify that it ever happened at all, and it's the verification that matters. Otherwise, it's just a story, and stories mean jack squat. But go ahead, show us your story, and I'll explain why it's irrelevant and stupid. Because even without seeing it, I know that it is.
Think God's real? 3 years ago, I had a blood clot burst in my leg.
I mean, I'm glad you're okay, I guess, but you can't get to any God from that. This is just going to be another, I believe it's true, so it is story, and that means absolutely nothing. Now, he might believe that, but what you believe doesn't prove anything, especially to anyone else. It certainly doesn't mean that it's factually correct. Unless you have objectively demonstrable evidence for anything, then it's nothing more than, cool story, bro. That is not going to convince me, and it shouldn't convince you. Granted, these are not smart people. They are idiots after confirmation, and that's not something that anyone should be proud of. But sure, go ahead, tell us your tale. It's not going to make any difference to anyone with a brain.
I went to bed at 9:30. I have a digital clock at the end of my bed. And I woke up at 10:35 because I saw the clock, and the Lord Jesus was standing at the end of my bed.
I don't believe you. No, I'm not saying that you're lying necessarily. You could have been having a dream. You could have been hallucinating. You could have been mistaken. There are lots of explanations far more reliable than, this imaginary man god showed up in my bedroom. That's going to take a lot of evidence, and your words mean absolutely nothing. You will have no evidence for this at all. I don't even have to wait for you to tell the rest of your story, and you will not have even tried to explore the more realistic explanations because this is the one that you really, really like. So what? Nobody should give a crap, not even you.
Like you saw him? He was standing at the end of my bed.
In your bed or by your bed? Because those are two entirely different things. And how do you know it was Jesus? Yes, I can only go by what he said so far, but really, how would you know? Is it the Middle Ages white guy depiction that is nothing like what a real Jesus would have looked like? Because that pretty much proves that you didn't see Jesus. I guess we just have to wait for him to clarify, and what does this have to do with his leg? Bald rationalizations and wishful thinking incoming, I guess. So let's go see.
And can you describe what he looked like to me? He looked like a 6-foot tall hologram. He had light coming at him on both sides, about 6 to 8 feet.
And why the hell do you think that was Jesus? It doesn't sound like any Jesus I've ever heard described before. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter what he said. My questions were still going to be the same. How have you ruled out any of the other obvious candidate explanations? How do you know that you were awake? I mean, last night I dreamed that we were having a huge haunted house for Halloween, and Sven Gulli, the horror host from MeTV, he showed up to sign autographs. I mean, it looked just like him. Now, I know it was a dream because I'm not delusional, but the religious, they tend to have problems with that, don't they? So there are going to be a lot of questions, and he's not going to have any answers, at least not any that make any rational sense. Because these people tend to have a lot of problems upstairs, don't they?
And the light looked like a rainbowish pearlized tint to it. And he was glorious looking. He had his face blocked off, though, with a big black dot, and it just followed him everywhere he went.
Okay, I am no longer taking anything this asshole says seriously. This is where this has got to be a joke or a troll, but the video maker seems to be taking it seriously because, not bright or anything. But how in the world could you possibly take this seriously? There's this big black dot over his face. Yeah, okay. Allow me to start backing away slowly because you've got something seriously wrong with you upstairs. Sure, if you were describing a dream, I would just shrug and go, yeah, okay, whatever. But he thinks this actually happened. Yeah, dude, seek professional help because clearly you need it.
But I had a blood clot that burst, and I didn't know it. He came into my room. I woke up 10 seconds later. He said, son, rest. 10 seconds later, the thing burst and I had 100 blood clot.
So if any of this is true at all, and we have no reason to think it ever is, but if any of it was true, you're probably already having medical problems anyhow, which are going to affect your mental state. Like I said, I'm kind of glad he's okay, but he's got some clear medical problems that can't affect his ability to think clearly. He's already asleep or he has just woken up, and he's seeing things while there are dangerous things going on medically, supposedly, in his body, and he wants people to take his ridiculous claims seriously. What the hell is wrong with these people? I really don't understand.
And they started going up and down my legs and my arms, and he walked around my bed for an hour and a half and supernaturally dissolved them all.
Then you have no proof that you ever had any, right? Because this sounds like a vivid dream or a drug trip, and he just really wishes it was true. This is how the religious that tell these stupid stories, and this is a stupider story than most, look to most people. Seriously, you're not even asking any of the rational questions that would allow you to figure out what was really going on. Because he doesn't care. He's got a silly story, and now because there is a receptive audience out there cheering him on, he gets to make himself look like a fucking idiot to everybody online because, well, he is. This is why it's virtually impossible to tell the difference between a Poe and a serious theist, because this is the quality of stories that they tell, and it would be absolutely insane to believe any of it without corroboratory evidence. The religious buy into it uncritically, hook, line, and sinker, because they just really wish it was true, and they aren't asking any of the critical questions that an intelligent person would. But that's a really stupid way to go through life, isn't it? You have to care about reality, and these people are positively terrified of it. This is why they spend all of their time making complete fools of themselves online, and in real life too. This is why we laugh at them. Because we should. Theists fail time and time again because they can't set aside their feelings and pay attention to the facts. The facts don't matter after all, at least according to them. They just want to be happy, and happiness means nothing when it comes to a proper, rational evaluation of the data. But the data is scary, right? So here we go again. Here comes a video by Apologetics Advocates run by Pastor Marvin McKenzie, and this is going to go over just about as well as you'd think. This is another one of those cases where they get so close, but they can't take that final step into objective reality because that's scary and they can't have that, can they? So we're going to have a conversation about different lenses by someone who can't see through any but his own. But we're all just like he is, right? Even though we're not. So let's get into this.
World through different lenses.
But what you're going to miss, and this is just my guess, is that just because you have a different lens, that doesn't make that lens accurate, and it's the accuracy that matters, not how it makes you feel. Granted, I've got no real idea, haven't seen it yet. This is just what the religious usually try, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's get back to it and see if it's going where I figure it is, because I'm not always right about these things.
Hi everyone, I'm Pastor Marvin McKenzie. I want to welcome you back to the channel. Today let's talk about something that's really important. That's understanding different perspectives.
And I agree, that is important. This is why the religious usually fail when trying to talk to atheists, though, because they don't understand our perspective. That's why they usually don't want to talk to us. They only want to talk to each other about us, and that means absolutely nothing. Because the ultimate goal at the end of the day needs to be the best understanding that we can manage of objective reality, and so far, for the religious at least, they rarely care about that at all, right? I'm going to be fair though, so let's go back and see what he has to say because, as I said before, I could be wrong.
Imagine two people looking at the same object. One uses a magnifying glass, the other one uses a microscope. Now, they're both examining the same thing, but their views are completely different.
Sure, but they could exchange tools and come to a common view of the same perspective. At least they have something to objectively look at, which is more than I can say for you. One isn't pretending he's looking at a dragon, while the other is pretending that he's looking at an elephant. You can put your tools down and see what you're both objectively examining. The religious, however, they can't do that. They are making claims about things for which they have absolutely no corroboratory evidence. They just really like the idea. I'm not concerned with what you like. I care only about the reality that we both objectively share. So far as we can tell, if something exists in that reality, we can both examine it in some way. Now, if you're blind, you might have to find a different way to gather information, but you can still do it, can't you? And for the very few people who simply have no way to research the world around them, while I pity them, that really has nothing at all to do with the rest of us, does it? So I don't think that this is going to work out the way that he likely wants, but hey, I'll be fair. Let's go see.
This happens in the real world too, especially when it comes to how we view life, the universe, and everything in it.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to say that your beliefs don't take place in the real world? Because that's sure how it sounds to me. Everything happens in the real world. And that means that since we apparently share the real world, if something exists for you, it exists for me, and vice versa. And you ought to be able to demonstrate the reality of your beliefs to other people without requiring them to share your beliefs first. This is where this always goes sideways. This is why perspective means nothing, and why from a Christian worldview or from a Christian perspective doesn't get you anywhere. Reality doesn't change just because you really like the idea. So please tell me you're not going there, because you're not going to be successful if you are.
Some people see things through the lens of God's Word.
which is faulty. That right there is what I'm talking about. You don't just get to make up a reality that you really, really like. You have to go where the evidence actually leads. And the religious, they really can't do that, can they? You can't just start with a preconception that there's a God, which is the only way to get to a God at all, and that's the only way you can get to a God's word is by just assuming the God is real first. Faith is a ridiculous thing. If you are relying on faith, then you are an idiot. Don't be an idiot. Yet this is going to wind up exactly where I predicted, isn't it? And that's just pathetic.
While others view life through the theory of evolution.
Oh, brother. He's even dumber than I thought. This is where I'm happy that this is just a short, because I'd probably go crazy trying to respond to a longer video. Your personal wishes and dreams mean nothing. There is a common reality out there that is true for everyone, and the only way we can determine what it's really like is to follow the evidence to the most critically evaluated conclusion that we can. It's not, but I really like the idea. Because you're just proving to everyone else what a complete imbecile you are. Not that these people tend to care, right?
Both are interpreting the same evidence, fossils, human history, and nature.
No, they're not. One starts with an unjustified conclusion made up because it elicits an emotional response, and the other is just looking at the external world and following the evidence where it leads. This is why you fail as miserably as you do. You can't start with what you like because what you like is irrelevant to reality. That's why when you talk to the religious, you usually get something like, "But I want to be special." So what? You're just not. That is an unjustified presumption that you're just making because it makes you feel good, and it needs to be jettisoned. You aren't important here. Only the facts are, and that's why the religious reject reality and try to substitute their own.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
But they come to different conclusions. Now, here's the thing. Both perspectives require faith.
No, they don't. That's the lie that the religious use to try to make everyone just like they are. If there is a tree, I don't need faith that it's there. I can see it, I can touch it, I can chop it down, depending on certain legalities and my own personal abilities. Yes, I have to assume that the external world really exists, but you have to do that too, don't you? That's not even on the table at this point, because most people, they all agree that there is an external reality, religious and non-religious alike. So I don't have to assume anything other than the problem of heart solipsism, but since we agree on that, that's completely irrelevant. You are the one with all of the faith, not me. I just have to trust that the best information that I can come up with my senses, while it's not going to be perfect, at least it gives me a starting point, and you agree with me. All of your actions prove that you do. So what faith am I exercising here that is any different than yours? Because I can certainly answer that question for you, but I don't think you can answer it for yourself.
The Christian trusts in the truth of Scripture.
You haven't demonstrated that. You just really like the idea, but that's not a rational path to truth. That's just wishes and dreams, and that's just dumb. This is you just making stuff up because you really like the idea, but that is not rationally justifiable. Your feelings don't matter, and that's the only thing that the religious are ever after. That's why they fail as miserably as they do. Because...
You stupid. Well, someone who believes in evolution has faith in natural processes and the people who teach them.
No, we can see the processes. No faith required. I don't have to trust anyone because I can run those experiments on my own. They have been replicated many, 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 many times. Now, show me one objective experiment that can be run by anyone that proves that a God is real. Just one. Go ahead. You can't do it because none exist, because you people are deluded out of your gourds, and this is why your silly beliefs are dying off. Good riddance.
Neither side can claim to be entirely free from faith.
Absolutely we can. Demonstrate one verifiable instance of faith on our side, and I'll concede. But you can't. This is just you making a fool of yourself. And of course, he's not talking to us, is he? He's just talking to other clueless Christians, and because none of them have ever talked to an actual atheist in their lives, he's free to lie through his teeth because they'll never know any better. Because your religion tells them not to go asking impertinent questions. Because it's terrified of what they might find out. Because the truth is scary. And if they find out the truth, you just might lose out on all that sweet, sweet money in the collection plate. And you don't want that.
So what can we do? Well, I think it starts with humility. Instead of arguing or dismissing the other side, we need to listen and try to understand where they're coming from.
You are not serious. They never are. Humility, my ass. You think you're the bestest buddy with the all-powerful creator of the universe. That is not humility. Secondly, you don't listen because you don't want to talk to us at all. You wouldn't be making any of these asinine pronouncements if you did, because we'd call you out on your stupid bullshit time and time again. This is the problem. This is why they refuse to talk to us. Because we're going to point and laugh, and you've earned it. Because this is just dumb.
Proverbs 15:1 says,
we don't care about your stupid book until you've justified that it's worthwhile, and you don't care about that. You just take it on faith. You just assume that everyone believes your cockamamie book because that's what you really wish was true. It's just not. So, chipmunk time.
By respecting different viewpoints, we can have meaningful conversations and open ourselves to truth.
You don't respect anyone but yourself. Don't be stupid. I don't respect differing viewpoints unless those viewpoints are rationally justifiable, and yours certainly are not. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, and it shows. So why should we respect you at all? We shouldn't. Respect is earned, it's not granted. If you want to have a rational conversation, then you have to start from a rational perspective, and you're not. You just wish things were true real hard, and that's foolish. So I can't take you seriously at all, and clearly you have never had a single conversation with a rational atheist in your life because you're so busy lying about what we believe. Because really, what else can you do? Admit to your flock that we've got a point? Yeah, that wouldn't go over very well, would it?
Let's choose understanding over division. After all, we're all just trying to figure things out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
But that's the problem. You're not trying to figure anything out because you are already convinced that you have all the answers. And you don't. Not demonstrably, anyhow. At least when I say I don't know, I'm not trying to just make crap up that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Not knowing is not knowing. And only a rational person is willing to be uncertain until the evidence actually comes along. That's not the religious by and large, at least not in practice. You should not believe anything until you have the proof in your hands, and that means that religion shouldn't exist at all because there is no evidence whatsoever that any of it is true. But see, if they could do that, then we wouldn't have problems, would we? We'd all just be sitting around until we actually had the knowledge that they want to proclaim up front. Because they don't actually care about the truth. They just really like the idea that they've got it, but that's not justifiable, is it? Your feelings don't mean anything, and that's why they fail. Because for them, their feelings are all that matters, and that's simply untrue. So, sorry, Pastor, you fail once again, and you don't even know why you fail, because you just don't care. And that makes you and your stupid religion pathetic. No surprise there at all. The religious really want to believe in Jesus, but they have no evidence. so they just believe anyhow and pretend that they do. That's really the problem, as we all well know, but our apologist today is an expert at playing make-believe, and that is nothing at all to be proud of. So let's go get to it. How about we do some Mike Winger? I know, he's a waste of time, but so too is every other apologist under the sun. He's desperately trying to pander to the already faithful because he knows that nobody else is going to pay him, and that's what he's really after. So he wants to tell us what is keeping us from Jesus. But I think it's clear that it's actually keeping him from reality. Not that he cares or anything, because he's terrified of the real world. The real world expects him to go out and get a real job, and he sure the hell doesn't want to do that. So let's go watch the insanity, because won't that be fun?
As soon as you think, if I was to truly follow Christ in my life, I would have to do, and you fill in the blank.
My answer would have to be, I'd have to lose my mind, and I don't think I saw that in there. Anybody else see that in there? Me either. Because that's the only answer that I can imagine actually being true. Of course, Mike just wants people to want to follow his imaginary friend, but I don't. I don't not want to do it, but the only way that I'd actually be able to, as a rational, sane human being, is to be convinced with evidence that such a thing was actually real, and that simply hasn't happened. I don't think it's even possible given what we know about Christian delusions. They aren't interested in reality, and I am. In fact, that's all I'm interested in. So no, I'm not going to go through your silly list. I'm going to expect evidence, and I don't think that's going to be forthcoming. How about you?
Whatever's in that blank, that you need to cut off.
Mike, is that the size of your dick? I mean, come on. I couldn't have been the only one thinking that. So yeah, go ahead, Mike. Cut it off. At least you won't spread your religious mind poison to the next generation. And yeah, I know we're already too late for that, but hey, go ahead and do it anyhow. Stop with the ridiculous religious bullshit. It's really getting old.
That you need to make a decision about. That's the thing that's keeping you ultimately from following Christ.
No, what's stopping me is a complete and total lack of any kind of corroboratory evidence, and that's not likely to change because you don't have any evidence to support any of it. I think it's hysterical to watch the religious when I say that I'm not convinced that Jesus ever existed at all. At least, we have no means whatsoever to separate the clear and obvious myths that Christians have just made up from anything potentially real. After all, Jesus is one of, if not the most ridiculously mythologized characters in all of human history, and we simply have nothing at all, nothing demonstrable that says that this Jesus character ever existed in the first place. Pick anything about Jesus and show how you actually know that it happened. Not believe, not have faith. Know. How do you know? Because you can't do it, and you know it. No, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I have not been convinced that any of it makes any sense at all. There are plenty of things in the Harry Potter books that kind of sound reasonable if you squint at them just right. But you don't get to just say, well, that's what happened in the life of the real Harry Potter, because there's no evidence that a real Harry Potter ever existed at all, and tons of evidence, including the say-so of the person who created him, to say that he didn't. So I'm not going to believe in Jesus on the basis of, it's a mundane claim. That Harry Potter lived with a family called the Dursleys in a suburb of London, that's a mundane claim too. It just doesn't mean it happened.
You know the things that are keeping you from following God. You know the stuff. It comes naturally. And if you aren't aware, if you feel like you're blind to it, pray, God, open my eyes.
Except I've got no evidence for God either. This is the stuff that would send Mike Winger running for the hills, or at the very least, making a whole lot of excuses for why his imaginary friend really exists. None of it stands up to any kind of rational scrutiny, though, but I bet he sure wishes it did, right? That's the problem, though. They are just looking for wishes and dreams, not facts and evidence. That's why if you ask any apologist, hell, ask any believer, what verifiable evidence convinced them that their gods were real, they wouldn't have a thing to tell you, would they? Sure, most of them are just too stupid to have ever thought about it rationally, and that's kind of a problem. But for people like Mike, he doesn't really have that excuse. He has to have thought about this rationally, at least you'd think so, right? We know that he hasn't because he wouldn't know rationality if it bit him in the dick, and then he had to cut it off. But it isn't an extraordinary expectation to expect these people to think, is it? So why are they so terrible at this?
You know, God's alive and real and interacts with you, even responds to prayer, so call out to him.
And how do you demonstrate any of that? Yeah, he doesn't, and he doesn't care. He's just a scam artist after the money of the people in his audience, but it's just not working anymore, is it? We all know that Christianity is dying in the West. Even Mike's own Calvary Chapel is falling apart. It's kind of hard to tell just how fast, since they don't maintain an official list of members. But everything that I've seen shows that the whole thing is imploding, and all of the infighting that's been going on, that certainly isn't helping. I wonder how long until Mike shows up with another church, because it isn't like he's going to go out and get a real job or anything, because I don't think he's capable. You know, guy without a dick. I'm pretty sure that lying to people and scamming them out of their money, those are his only marketable skills. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? Yet this is Mike Winger we're talking about, and come on, we all know that he's got to know this is all bullshit, right? He has to. Nobody can legitimately be that dumb. Nobody in the clergy anyhow, which might be why he's no longer in the clergy. He's a full-time shill for the religious. Yet he did go to seminary, the School of Ministry at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and he was ordained. I mean, really, go listen to Bart Ehrman's stories about seminary, because he says it's impossible to go through the process without understanding just how weak, just how pathetic actual Christian faith actually is, and how poorly grounded the whole mess is for anyone with a brain. And that's why they're not after people with brains. They want people who are desperate to believe. And that's why Mike is now a full-time apologist. Because he's good at lying. Probably not anything else, but he is good at lying. And that's why we laugh at his ass so much. Because he's earned it. They don't know what proof looks like, do they? Not that they care or anything, because we all know they don't, because they just desperately want to believe, and they assume that everyone is just like they are, even though we're not. So with that in mind, get ready, because this one, I have a feeling, is going to be rough. We've done a few testimony videos in the past, and they never work out for the religious, because testimony is never going to convince the skeptics, but the religious, they really have nothing else, do they? So, here we go again. This only makes the religious look crazy, and this is no exception. So strap in, because this is kinda cringeworthy, and it only makes the apologist look like a complete asshole. Because he is one, of course. So, try to enjoy, I guess.
This has got to be one of the wildest testimonies ever. Watch this.
And this is why testimony means nothing, and I haven't even seen it yet. So let's touch on that first, and then we'll see what his wild testimony is. Testimony doesn't prove anything. It's just a story held together with interpretation without any evidence in support. That's not to say that something didn't happen, because there usually is a kernel of truth at the center of these tales, but it's wrapped up with claims and interpretations and wishful thinking, all of the stuff that doesn't mean anything, to the point that it's often hard to separate them into their component parts. Sure, this might have happened, but all of the stories that you tell that you can't prove around it, yeah, that's where this whole thing falls apart. So let's see where this goes, shall we?
But how do I know Jesus is real? What do you mean?
That is not a good sign. Now, it's hard to read the original subtitles at the bottom because this idiot has his fat head in the way, and the audio is kind of bad, but we'll try to muddle through. Now, I know that we're getting a purposely edited version of this, and that's always hard to gauge, but anyone who approaches you with this kind of thing, that's always got to be a red flag. Now, I'm going to try to say how I would approach this, and that might not be possible because, as you know, I haven't seen the video yet, but I'll see if I can give it a go. I'd have a lot of questions if someone came up to me and said, "How do I know that Jesus is real?" Especially if it was out of the blue, but we have no real context here, do we? So it's really hard to make a coherent judgment. Let's get a little bit further into it and see where this goes.
How do I know you're real? I'm right in front of you. Okay.
And that's something that I see a lot. My answer is, if you want me to prove that I'm real, come to where I am, or pay for me to go to where you are. I'm not really that picky, and I would be more than happy to whack you over the head with a baseball bat until you either admit that I'm real, or you pass out from blunt force trauma. Because I can prove that I'm real, at least if we agree that the problem of hard solipsism is going to be a problem. But since we already agree that reality exists, it's not really a big deal, is it? So, can I prove that I exist? Absolutely. And I can replace the baseball bat with a brick, or my fists, or whatever you'd prefer, but you are going to have to admit that something is happening external to yourself. Or you're going to be in a coma, your choice. So, that's easy. Now, try to do that with Jesus. Go right ahead.
Jesus was right in front of 500 eyewitnesses after he was crucified and resurrected. 500 credible eyewitnesses.
Says who? That's just a story in a book of mythology that you cannot independently verify. This is a problem that they simply cannot get around, although they will try. They have no independent testimonies from any of those 500 supposed eyewitnesses. It's all just something that Paul, or the author of 1 Corinthians, claimed. A claim is not a fact until you can back it up with corroboratory evidence, and they can't do that. In fact, it's really simple to turn this around on them. Say, I can prove that Harry Potter defeated Voldemort. Just look at all the people in the book who are eyewitnesses to the fight. Hell, you've got a movie, right? Go watch it. Lots of people were there. Of course, that proves no more for Harry Potter than it does for Jesus, and you can't prove that either of them were ever real. Of course, the religious won't like that because this isn't about truth, it's about comfort. But that's another problem entirely, isn't it?
But 100 years from now, when you're dead, and people say that you were living, does that make it wrong?
We'll probably have a lot better evidence for my life than that. Hell, if YouTube is still around, they'll have more than 1,000 videos that prove that I actually lived. There are a fair number of pictures of me out there somewhere. I don't exactly know where, but they're out there, trust me. There are things that I've done, people that I've interacted with, things that I am leaving behind that can be used as evidence for my existence. What do you have for Jesus? Nothing but an unsubstantiated story in a book of fairy tales. And there too we can say, well, Rapunzel is real, it's in that book. But that doesn't mean anything, does it? The religious are just so desperate to believe things without evidence, and that's their downfall. Granted, they don't care, because they're a bunch of idiots. But Still, one standard. That's all we need, and that standard proves that they're wrong.
Where did you live? That's crazy. I was a drug addict for 22 years, buddy. I was an atheist and I contested everything, except I was evil, angry, and people were dead because of my life that I lived.
And what does this have to do with proving Jesus? This is just more theistic story time. That is all entirely irrelevant to the topic of this video, but they have to throw it in because they're desperately trying to find anything that will appeal to the emotions of their victim. Because you know what this looks like to me? It looks like some random kook in a diner trying to harass the staff with his religious bullshit. And yes, I've seen that happen many times. These people don't understand boundaries because they don't care, because they're assholes. It's no wonder that they fail as often as they do. And they should.
I was angry and I had the same contesting heart that you have right now. So here I am, I have this encounter with a God I didn't believe that stops me from getting shot at.
And you can't prove to anyone that you had any kind of encounter with a real God. That's a claim with absolutely no evidence in support. I, who never saw any of this, am not going to believe you because you say so. Hell, I'm going to laugh in your face, and what are you going to do then? Go look for easier prey? Get mad? Those seem to be the two most common options because they don't really know how to handle actual skeptics. We are not concerned with what you claim, only with what you can prove, and you can't prove a damn thing, not even to yourself. Lying to yourself because it makes you feel good, that isn't rational. But rationality isn't something that the religious know how to do, is it?
Come on, dude. I leave this program 2 months later. I come home, and my girlfriend had the same encounter that I did when I was gone.
Prove it. Hell, prove that you have a girlfriend at all. See, they're expecting us to blindly believe them, and why in the hell would we do that? You're just some dipshit at the counter of a random diner harassing the help, and you can just go fuck off, really. That doesn't prove anything, and it's the proof that matters, not your cockamamie claims. So I'd be calling bullshit all over the place, then pointing and laughing, and then maybe calling the police because this guy, he really needs to go. He needs to be checked into a hospital for a psych hold. The only story anyone is going to remember is the crazy loser that wouldn't shut up about his delusions. Because that's really all that's going on.
And we got married, and we've been married for 19 years, and I traveled the world to preach the gospel, buddy. The one that you might not believe in, but he believes in you.
And you have nothing better to do with your life than try to convert people in a diner. Yeah, I don't believe it. It sounds like he's still on drugs and seeing things, and this does nothing whatsoever to prove that Jesus is real. It only proves that the content creator has no grasp on critical thinking, skepticism, or rationality, which really isn't a surprise either, is it? I mean, seriously, what in the hell is wrong with these people? I'd really like to know.
One day, you're going to face Jesus, and you're going to answer for your life. And all the contesting, and all the fighting, and all the arguing that you do, you're going to stand before God, and your knee is going to bow.
Yeah, get the hell away from me, you lunatic. Welcome to more empty threats from the religious. That's really all that they have. Zero evidence, they've never thought about any of this critically, they just really want to believe, and they can't believe that everyone isn't just like they are. This is really just laughable, but what do you expect? Nothing more than this, really, because these people are real idiots.
Wow, if you love Jesus, type amen in the comments and subscribe for more.
And as Dan McClellan would say, I'm good. Because this was one of the stupidest videos I have subjected myself to, at least recently, and now I've subjected you to it. Don't say I never did anything for you, but this is really, really stupid, isn't it? It amazes me the kind of slop that the religious think will be convincing, but then again, they're not making this content for us, are they? It's solely for the religiously gullible who are desperate to believe. I'd be laughing in this fucker's face, and so should you. Granted, that might put his job at risk, and I don't think I would recommend that, but go in the back room and burst out laughing because that's really all this is worth. And maybe that's what happened in the end, I really don't know. If I had been managing that diner or whatever it was, I don't really know, I would have escorted this idiot outside and told him to never come back. And then he would have just gone and whined about how he's being persecuted. Yeah, I guess being a dick in public is their right? But this is never going to convince anyone because this is stupid. If you don't already believe, you're not going to believe because most people aren't that dumb. It's really too bad that the religious are, though, isn't it? The religious love to think that God is love. But what God actually is, if you bother to read the Bible and actually think, is a complete moral monster. Still, it doesn't stop them from trying to spin it that way, does it? Because these people are dumb. So, here we go again. Today, we're going to go back to Cliff Connectal, and I honestly don't know why I keep doing this to myself, but so many of these short religious video channels are just recycling Cliff's stupidity because that's what a lot of apologetics online does. This comes from a channel on TikTok called Christianity.Believers, which makes no sense, but hey, that's par for the course, isn't it? So what does Cliff have for us to laugh at this time? Let's go find out.
God says, I promise I will never turn my back on you.
Well, that's bullshit, isn't it? Because look at all the terrible things that have happened to the Jews over the years. You know, God's chosen people. Where was God during the Holocaust? He was clearly out looking for hookers and blow. Hell, half the things that have happened to the Jews were because of God. I'd much rather be ignored by this massive moral monster than have him pay any attention whatsoever because this guy is a complete douchebag. So I don't really know what to say to Cliff right now because his first couple of words are complete nonsense. I have a feeling all the rest of the words are going to be nonsense too. Let's go see.
If you turn your back on God, if you turn your back on Christ, that is your decision.
Yes, it is. Of course, you can't really turn your back on something that isn't demonstrably real, so there is that. Don't turn your back on Dracula. Yeah, okay, no problem since Dracula isn't real. Of course, the religious can't even consider the possibility since they're just running on pure fifis and faith with no intellect in support of it because they just don't care. In fact, I was just watching a video and I don't remember if it was Atheist Experience or The Line. They kind of look alike a lot of the time. I think it was The Line. It had Matt Dillahunty on it, so that's kind of the only thing that matters in this case. Anyway, the theist was so absurdly ignorant about their own religion, but they just kept going back to belief because it was what they really wanted to be true. Every time Matt asked for any support, they had none. They had never even read the Bible. The only thing they had was the hippy-dippy nonsense that they'd heard from the pulpit, and he didn't care enough to find out if any of it was actually true. In fact, he actually didn't give a shit. He just liked the sound of it. In my opinion, it is. Well, based on what? It's my opinion. It took a long time for them to actually get through to this guy, which, to his credit, he really started to care in the end, or at least he claimed he cared. I don't know because I can't read his mind. I doubt anything is ever going to really change him because it's really hard to get the religious mind poison out of your head. but to his credit, he did say he would try, and that's a starting point at least. All of this religious crap is nonsense until you can back any of it up with evidence. It doesn't matter what you want to be true, only what you can demonstrate actually is. And they can never do that, can they?
But God loves you with an unconditional love. He treasures you. He values you.
Prove it. I mean, prove anything. I'm not really that picky. This is just theistic story time. It's Cliff spouting nonsense that he really likes for emotional reasons and hoping that you'll go along for the ride. I'm not taking any of your just so stories about your imaginary friend seriously until you can prove that they're real. And Cliff isn't even going to try to do any of that, is he? He doesn't care any more than he wants you to. This is all just emotionally comforting twaddle, said with his hand out for your money. That's how religion works after all, and it is absolutely nothing to be proud of.
Is there going to be a separation between some people and God for eternity? Yes.
And that's all God's fault if you really stop and think about it. Because God specifically set everything in motion, knowing full well the end result. Absolutely nothing could ever happen without God's full foreknowledge and acceptance. So if anybody's going to hell, it's all God's fault. Because remember, under the Christian model, there really can't be any free will. God knows what you are going to do every second of every day, and there's nothing at all you can do to change it. You are just following a script that was written from the beginning of time. That's what these stupid omni-properties mean, because they can't mean anything else. I think that's why at least some Christians have been trying to walk back the omni crap for a while now, because they recognize just how bad it makes their imaginary friend look. But you don't get to just reinvent your God with qualities you like better just because you like them better. That's not how real things act. They are what they are, and the only way to understand what they are is by examining them objectively. And it's funny how you can't do that with any God, right? So, how do these people actually know? That's a good question.
But that is because people have turned their backs on God and gone their own way.
Simply not possible. They were destined to turn their backs on God, and God knew it from the get-go. So he created these people knowing full well that they were going to fry, and he did it anyhow. What an asshole. Because you'd think that anyone all-powerful and all-knowing and all-loving, you'd think they wouldn't do that, right? You can't come up with any explanations for why he would. That's why the religious turn to endless excuses, because they're not concerned with actual facts. They just want to feel good at the end of the day, and that's what their entire belief system comes down to. That's kind of pathetic, isn't it?
In fact, I think I know what the theme song of hell will be. I did it my way.
Impossible, since you have no choice but to do it the way God set it up. God is responsible for absolutely everything. God is the evil dick around here, not us. We can't do anything that God didn't already foresee and set in motion on his own and have the power and ability to change. Yet he didn't, did he? Because God is a complete asshole. Now, granted, we have no reason whatsoever to think that God is real. I'm just playing along, but that's really all you can do with the religious, right? Saying you're a delusional moron that has no evidence for anything, that makes for some pretty boring videos if that's all you do, so occasionally we just play their game just to make them look stupid in the end. Not that they need any help. So, sure, Cliff, we'll just play your game for comedic effect. What else you got?
God says, come back to me. That is what Jesus consistently taught. In the parable of the prodigal son, he told about a father whose son ran away, but the father waited patiently.
Take two? Anyone? Seriously, how can you be this incompetent? I mean, this is a 1-minute video, and he screwed up about 45 seconds in. Shoot it again. Or maybe just start from the flub and put in an edit. It's not like any of this is live or anything. Why do we see this so much from the religious? Why are they so bad at this? I'd really like to know.
For the son to return home. God is waiting patiently for you to return to him.
No, he's not. I mean, he shouldn't be, because he knows what you're going to do before you do it. If he knows that you're not coming back, then he'd be a complete idiot to be expecting you to do so. This God thing of yours is a moron. Their theology is absurdly inconsistent. It's like they've never bothered to actually think about it, which I figure is true because thinking for the religiously deluded is really, really, really hard. Then again, this is all just a bunch of emotionally comforting words strung together in a desperate attempt to separate you from your money. It's a con. It's saying what he hopes you want to hear, so you'll leave a buck or two in a can by his feet. It doesn't have to make any sense, because he doesn't think you're bright enough to know any better. And that's never going to change. This whole thing is utterly pathetic.
He loves you with a love that's patient. He loves you with a love that is kind. He loves you with a love that is not determined by your performance.
Which is just an outright lie. Because patient and kind, and certainly a love not determined by what you do, wouldn't wind up with you roasting forever in a lake of fire, would it? Because the whole Christian shtick is condemning you for sin. What is sin except you doing things that God, for whatever arbitrary reason he can come up with, doesn't like? That is absolutely condemning you for what you do. There's no other way to see it. So Cliff is just full of shit as usual. He's picking and choosing the stuff that he likes and ignoring the actual ramifications of his beliefs. What else is new, right?
God's love flows from his inner being. He is love.
God, at least the Christian God, how they look at their God, is an immoral monster. Just read the Bible. Mass genocide multiple times, culminating in sending the vast majority of the human species to eternal torment forever because God gets off on it. Remember, Leviticus 1:9 says that God likes the aroma of burning flesh. This is the God that Cliff worships, and it's reprehensible in the highest order. The second that you take a single step backwards and evaluate what he's claiming in the light of his actual theology, it all falls apart. God is a dick. God screwed over humanity by creating us knowing just how badly we'd fail, because God wants to see us fry. Torment gives God a woody. Tell me how else we should see this if you can. Because their beliefs are absurdly inconsistent. You can only believe this part by ignoring that part over there. Once you see it all put together in a single consistent narrative, it doesn't say what people like Cliff desperately wish that it did. Because if he told you the truth about his beliefs, no one would ever give him a dime, and he can't have that, can he? So, what do you think about this? Let me know down in the comments. Is there any way to make what Cliff said make any kind of sense with the rest of the garbage in the Bible? I honestly don't think so, but maybe you're more creative than I am. Give it a shot, because I'm really curious what people can come up with.